Let's break some swords.
This is the Kitsune clan, a group of sword enthusiasts who like cosplay, reenactment, and historical martial arts. If you have similar interests, feel welcomed.
We had a video on the Kanabo, and we pointed out that this must have been a frightening weapon for samurai because it's a weapon that can break your katana. And among the comments under this video, one viewer asked whether we could have a look at the Chinese sword breaker, and this is it here now. Viewers request response, look at sword breakers in the wider sense. The Chinese sword breaker is an interesting tool because it basically looks like a supermassive sword type thingy, which means it's not as top heavy as the Kanabo. It has kind of a proper handle, but it's definitely made for bludgeon damage and especially for damaging blades. It's a fun thing to swing around and it can hammer quite some impact onto an incoming weapon. It's not as slow as I expected it, but that might be due to the fact that I have a simple rubber prop here that is not as heavy as an original, guess. Still, you can get an interesting impression from that. And I can feel similarities to the Kanabo, but I definitely also feel that this is much more Chinese in thinking and much more coming from a sword-like thingy. I like it quite a bit, and you can have quite fun with it, and it still hurts if you get hit by it. So, what most people think of when they hear swordbreaker is this comp-like type of dagger that in German is interestingly called Degenbrecher, which is more specific, meaning a specific type of thrusting rapier that could be broken with that. And the idea to really catch a sword with it is, of course, more problematic. For me, we are testing here a lot of stuff in foam and polypropylene because I don't want to test metal weapons out in public. This is more of a material problem because if you try to have something with evenly spaced structures that could catch a sword, mechanically this is tricky. We had a keyblade that had a bit of such an arrangement, and I was thinking maybe it is able to catch something like that, but it really is not good at it and it cannot hold up for that. We have here a dragon type katana that I have not looked up where it's coming from. If I still manage it, I will add it to the description box. And it does a more decent job. Sometimes it manages to catch the blade between these teeth and lock it up. So yeah, possible. And I can totally see where people are coming from. I don't really get why people think that it's interesting to break the sword with it. I think it's interesting to catch the sword, have control with it, and then do something with another weapon. After researching more, we indeed found a foam weapon that might really act as one of these blade catching devices, and it's from Xenoblade. It has not a really nicely designed hilt. I have trouble placing my hands in there, but the backside has these strange protrusions and indentations, and they can catch a blade and they can lock the blade up, and then you might have been able to break it. But remember, the original historical thing is a small dagger. This here is quite a different scale. And yes, if you make it that large, that might be possible to break something with it. But again, I think this is much more about catching and locking a blade than it was about breaking one. What can we still use to break a blade? We really want to be mean to swords here today, right? And I was thinking Kanabo, Chinese sword breaker. What is about European war clubs? The Kanabo basically is a big club with a lot of metal put onto it for a quite long distance. If you look at European war clubs, mostly the very distant part has been secured by metal, and that's probably not the exact same effect as a Kanabo, but it's still fun to wield one of these things around. And definitely, yes, with something like that, you could also probably shatter quite some blades or at least also damage the edges. And unlike many of the Japanese weapons, or also some of the pole weapons otherwise, where you would slide along the shaft and it would be a problem when swords chip out pieces of that, here I don't think there was too much sliding going on. So smacking this thing against the sword and taking a hit at the wood region and chipping some pieces out of it would not have been as dramatic, and therefore this could have been used in this way quite realistically. And it's also super fun and super frightening to move that thing around. And I think I like that even more than the sword breaker, although I think I like the Kanabo more. With the Kanabo, I had this very explicit possibility of controlling the sword because I could push it to a certain degree. And so in bind, I had more options. And I think that's what the Chinese sword breaker can also do. It was made out of a softer material, often bronze. And so the sword could cut into it a bit. And also this region along this distant part where you have all these indentations, I think all this was made to make more control over a blade when you're in bind. And that's what I don't have with these European clubs or maces. Or maybe this longer wooden part was also thought in this direction. I'm not sure about that. But as I said, probably I like the Kanabo more than the European one. It's still fun to throw it around. And it's still painful also with this rubber training devices. If you get hit by them, be happy for every protective type of glove you have there. Yeah, and that's not it. If we think about damaging blades with different types of weapons in the past, we probably also have to think a bit further. The concept of the sword breaker, of locking the sword away from movement, that is something that we had already, and that was with the pronged weapons. If we, for example, take the Chinese butterfly swords, they definitely can lock an incoming blade after deflection, and then a locked blade and a second weapon with a heavy type of bronze hilt or whatever, this could have been definitely used to strike against the blade and damage it, or more likely trying to disarm it from the opponent, but it would probably also heavily have damaged this weapon. And of course, if we look at these prongs, we know that in Japan we had things like the jute that could have been used as a left-hand weapon and then try to disarm or even damage something on the blade with a second weapon. If I would strike, if I have a katana in the lead hand and strike with a tsuba against the blade of the opponent, that might have made quite some damage. More obvious probably if we go on Okinawa and have the zai there. If we use the zai to catch the blade and then use the other side to strike against the weapon, maybe to disarm. Of course, we could also simply strike to the hands for disarming, but this is about the sword breaker, right? We want to damage swords. And with the Zai, there's this fun way of holding it upside down, basically in a Mordschlag position, to have more of a club type of powering situation. That would be definitely something where we can damage some blades with it, at least I hope so. So that's it. Yeah, basically, no, this is just a small outlook on what could be there besides of the Kanabo. And I also think we have not fully explored the Kanabo yet. There's more to look at, but there's definitely something that the viewer has brought to my attention. There's more of that out there. There seem to be weapons made especially to control swords and to damage swords. And that might be a quite interesting road to explore further. I think the Zai and also the butterfly swords are specifically designed in this direction. The sword breaker definitely. I'm not sure whether the European type of club or maces have been designed with this in mind, but they could at least be misused in this way. And also, you see, there are some cosplay versions of sword catchers, if you want to call them like that, if you want something like that. With this, I hope it could inspire you and hope to see you around next time.